Hello, everybody, and welcome into the MVP show for November 22nd, 2020. Thanksgiving just a couple days away and already in NFL Week 11. Alongside Brennan Miller and Dan Passante, I'm John Vicari. Boys, another Sunday, and as I mentioned, Thanksgiving just a couple days away. How you guys getting ready for the holiday?
Well, I'm not doing anything as usual these
Awesome.
days, and just really the addition of a turkey. Hopefully, now that'll be what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm going to go on my annual crusade against stuffing. I'm not a fan of stuffing. My brother will make it as a snack on a normal day. Like it'll just be like a Wednesday in June, and he'll be sitting here at the stove making himself a bowl full of stuffing to eat. So at that point, I'm absolutely against it, and that will continue until I die. Absolutely.
Well, he's a legend, that's why, because stuffing is the best part of Thanksgiving. That's a great fact. I don't love it enough to have it as a snack or to have it in June or in the summer at all, but I'm a big stuffing guy. Huge stuffing guy.
It's ridiculous, honestly. Like literally, he'll get hungry, and instead of grabbing a snack from the pantry or something, he will grab a box of stuffing and make himself an entire box and just eat it in one sitting. And then just have lunch and dinner afterwards as well. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. It's one of those things where you're exposed to it so much that you become anti that. It's me and stuffing. It's also me and ranch. My other brother puts ranch on everything, so I don't like ranch.
Very nice. So I don't know how to transition into our opening topic from that. I was trying, but no.
There's no other way.
Yeah.
There's no way to.
Oh, I got it. From Thanksgiving to Knicks fans maybe giving thanks for their for who they drafted, and that was amazing. Yeah. For who they drafted, that was Obi Toppin in this past Wednesday's NBA draft. Took him, 8 overall, 6'9", National College Player of the Year, comparisons to Sean Marion, Amari Stoudemire. He's under CAA, the Creative Arts Agency, which Leon Rose, who's now the president of the New York Knicks, previously ran. He's born in Brooklyn, so you have a story there. Was the A10 Player of the Year as well at Dayton. Didn't get to see him, of course, in March Madness because it didn't happen due to COVID. So a lot of people, regardless, don't watch Dayton basketball throughout the year. But Dayton was poised to make a run in the NCAA tournament, but did not happen. He tries to mimic his game after Anthony Davis. Scouts like his explosiveness, post-game, his high-level scoring. His weaknesses are on the defensive side of the ball, but luckily for him, Tom Thibodeau is a defensive coach for the New York Knicks. So that wrong should be righted by Tom Thibodeau in a couple of years. And I think we all could agree. Good pick, good player, very good odds for him to be the Rookie of the Year this season. He's talented. But is it the right move for the New York Knicks to make? Was it the right pick for what they have? Because there's this old notion that you draft the best available. The best player left on the big board, that's who you take. And obviously, Obi Toppin was at the top of that list when the draft finally got down to the Knicks at number 8. So, am I happy that the Knicks drafted Obi Toppin? I like Obi Toppin. I think he's, again, a good player and Brooklyn-born. There is a story there. But I don't think he fits what the Knicks needed in this draft. They need a point guard. They've needed a point guard for 3 or 4 years now. Now, I know this draft, as we'll get into, isn't top-heavy. There's a lot of depth in it, so maybe Obi Toppin, a couple years down the line, will realize he's the best player taken from this draft. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But when you look at this Knicks roster, and even with free agency that started a couple days ago, still looking at this Knicks roster, they have a huge hole at point guard. And you could have easily picked someone of high caliber in the top 10 at point guard. Instead, you go to Obi Toppin, who is a forward, and the Knicks have maybe too many forwards. So in terms of, building a team or a well-rounded team, I don't think the Knicks maybe made the best pick. And I talked about it on our podcast. I think the NBA is becoming more positionless, where you could put a 6'8" guy at point guard. Centers need to be able to shoot. You can't just have a big center who just gets rebound. I mean, you can, but they're not as effective as a center who could shoot. So maybe that's what the Knicks were thinking, where they won't have maybe a traditional point guard. But still looking at this team, that's a huge hole that they still have not filled. And I'm not saying that the Knicks have to fix everything in this one year. Obviously, the last couple of years have been miserable if you're a Knicks fan. and from the organizational standpoint. But you had a draft, you had a top 10 pick, and you decided to go something which you probably is your strong suit in power forwards, but you get another one in Obi Toppin. I like the guy, but maybe not the right pick for the Knicks.
Yeah, I would agree with just the fact that they have, like, their entire roster, like we said, is basically power forwards. So I think the Knicks made the right decision if they thought that he was the best available player. That would be good. But if not, again, they already have a lot of power forwards. I'm just looking at the draft order right here. There's one shooting guard and 2 point guards and one shooting guard taken before Obi Toppin.
Yes.
Everyone else was a small forward, a center, and he was the first power forward taken in the draft. So maybe the Knicks did think that he was the best available player. The other big man that obviously wasn't going to fall to number 8, but the name that everyone knew was James Wiseman, who ended up going to Golden State with the second pick. These are the guy that I knew. So if the Knicks really thought that he was the best player, then I hope that works out for them and that he is a power forward they keep, and the rest they can get rid of, because I don't know their names and we don't know their names, and it doesn't matter because they're not really the players who are going to help the Knicks win.
Yeah, so in terms of what the Knicks have done since the draft, and honestly since our podcast when we did it yesterday and it aired today on VIC Radio, but the Knicks went out and they signed a couple free agents. They signed Elfrid Payton back for 1 year, $5 million, and the center Nerlens Noel for 1 year, $5 million. You might remember him a couple years out of Kentucky. Those moves are non-factors to me. They have to spend some money, so that's where they decided to go with it. Deciding to get Nerlens Noel now. But
man, I remember when I'm not a basketball guy at all,
yes.
but I know the name Nerlens Noel. He was supposed to be the next big thing coming out of Kentucky.
Yeah, and now he's a Knicks, so there you go. But they didn't feel anything.
What's more prestigious, playing for Kentucky basketball or the New York Knicks?
Well, I don't know. I think most in college would say Kentucky, but or most college basketball fans, but I don't know. A couple years ago, maybe a different discussion, but yeah. So, but there you go. Nerlens Noel, big signing, 1 year, $5 million. Elfrid Payton, 1 year, $5 million. So the Knicks still haven't filled that point guard role. Elfrid Payton was there last year. Dennis Smith Jr. there last year. Frank Ntilikina. And I guess that's what they're going with going forward. But those 3 guards were your point guards last year on a team that should have been, I think it was the 4th worst in the NBA, and then the draft lottery put them where they did. So they missed out on free agency as well. Gordon Hayward signs 4 years, $120 million with Charlotte. Fred VanVleet, 4 years, $85 million with Toronto. And DJ Augustine, who I know is, all right, not the biggest name, but that's who maybe the Knicks were going to target. 3 years, $21 million to Milwaukee. So 3 guys that were rumored or had interest in Knicks, or there was some report, at least one, not a Knick. So it's interesting. And obviously, I don't think that the Knicks should go for the home run now or give a player a max. There's no one worth it right now in NBA free agency. But they have to compile some roster that next year can lure someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Knicks. Because you still look at their roster now, and maybe they will play better than they appear on paper, and that's what Knicks fans are hoping. Not too good, obviously, where they don't get another draft pick to help. But this team is still not a destination for a free agent. You get to play with RJ Barrett, who I think's, up and coming. Mitchell Robinson's a very good center. Julius Randle, but I think this is the last year of his contract. And then Obi Toppin. And then just a bunch of role players who've been in the league 3 or 4 years. I don't know how that allures a free agent. And I'm not saying, they should have maybe given Fred VanVleet the max, but their biggest signings thus far, Elfrid Payton and Nerlens Noel. So not looking great if you're a Knicks fan. But again, it can't be all built. Rome wasn't built in a day or whatever the expression is. But I think Knicks fans, and especially I think, that they should have done more, especially in free agency. Because the draft, again, we don't know how the guards could have played. People arguing Tyrese Halliburton's going to be better than Obi Toppin. You really don't know. But you could argue that the Knicks needed a guard more than a forward in that draft. And they decided to do the opposite and still haven't gotten a guard in free agency. So.
Yeah, that's a problem. If they can become a destination for free agents, then they can be good someday, especially with the way the NBA is currently constructed. If you don't have a star They're just not going to win that many games. The Knicks just seem to target guys that they know they can get, which might be part of the problem. They definitely need to land one of these bigger names. And also, the Knicks need to be good because the Nets are good. I know that Knicks fans in the city, they don't like that. I know they don't like that. And now they're talking about James Harden going to Brooklyn. The Knicks need this for their fans as well.
Yeah, and the old adage is that this is always a Knicks town, and I still think it is. You open the papers today, and it's what the Knicks didn't do, not what the Nets did thus far in free agency, to complement Kyrie and KD. So it's still a Knicks town, but that shifts over years. If this next generation, our generation, watches the Nets for a couple years, win a championship, go to multiple playoffs, it easily could shift. This notion that it won't change in a year, but KD and Kyrie spent 5 or 6 seasons here, and people are going to start gravitating towards the Nets. Not because they're fake fans or not committed to the Knicks, but when the Knicks have been so bad for so long, you start to see that gravitation. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Knicks will start to get better where it doesn't happen or it's stopped in its tracks, but it's beginning right now because if you told me, hey, John, turn on a Knicks or Nets game, I think there's more interest towards the Nets just to see KD and Kyrie, and maybe for drama reasons, but also because they play a higher brand of basketball.
And I can agree with that. As a non-basketball fan, I think at this point, I gravitate more towards Brooklyn than the Knicks, just because they have the names, they have the players that you recognize. And I understand I'm a fan of history in general. I understand that the Knicks have this storied history. They've had, great players in the past. They've won championships. But right now, I don't call myself a fan of any basketball team, and I am a homer in every sport except for the NFL, where my dad's a Packers fan, so I'm a Packers fan as well. But every other team is New York. And honestly, at this point, if I go with the history, I'd have to say the Knicks. If I go with the more fun team and the team that I think would be more enjoyable to watch in the NBA, I think it'd have to be the Nets, simply because of the players they have on that roster and the fact that they're willing to go out and change up their style a little bit to conform to how teams are viewed in the present.
Yeah. And again, you're not alone. You're not some outcast there. That's a gradual feeling amongst people our age and younger. So there you go. But those are the NBA takeaways. We mentioned some notable other free agents. I know, Dan, for you, your Celtics got Tristan Thompson. So, finals, here we come. But do you have any thoughts on that acquisition before we move on? I don't know if you have much, but
well, they needed a big man. So the fact that Tristan Thompson will definitely help because that's like the one. Well, that's the biggest thing they were lacking in the playoffs this past year. So overall, I think it's a positive.
Okay. There you go. I couldn't add anything on that, but Dan, our resident Celtics expert, and those, the big moves of the NBA free agency. And again, it's a new guard coming for the Knicks, Obi Toppin, and you hope it pans out. Now shifting to another New York team, and this one is on the bye this week, and that's the New York Giants. And this past week, instead of just reveling in the fact that the Giants are half a game out of first place in the NFC East, at 3-7, will go into Thanksgiving with fans believing they could win the division. Instead, there's a kerfuffle, which I think is the best word for it, and the Giants' offensive line coach is gone. Mark Colombo is fired. And the details of this have been leaking pretty much this past week, and I'll get it on my further point, but really I don't think national news the way I think it should be from a New York team. But nonetheless, Mark Colombo fired, and it was spawned from a disagreement over technique where Joe Judge told Nick Gates, the center, that he should do something while Mark Colombo thought that his technique was fine, he was doing the right thing. They brought in, or Joe Judge, I should say, brought in Dave DiGiulimo. I probably botched that name. You could look it up, but he was an assistant offensive line coach in New England, this and that, brought him in to help and to assist Mark Colombo. Mark Colombo did not take a liking to that. It finally boiled over this past week when Judge ripped Andrew Thomas in a film session, the offensive tackle rookie that the Giants just took. And it was, again, during a film session, and Colombo defended Andrew Thomas and said, no, he was doing the right thing, or at least not ripping him to the extent that Joe Judge was. Colombo fought back, obviously. They went into the office. Obviously, they're grown men. They had their, anger come to the forefront. And
punched each other in the mouth.
No, there was no. This is the thing. There was emotions were flaring. Mark Colombo's no longer part of the New York Giants. Joe Judge is, and Dave DiGiuliano is the he is the Giants offensive line coach now. But these reports of a fight are untrue. The details I just gave you are a courtesy of Mike Silver of Sports Illustrated and Kimberly Jones of WFAN. And what Brennan's doing did not happen. There's still a conception that Mark Colombo and Joe Judge fought, which what I sort of like because I love what Joe Judge has done this season. Yes, but it didn't happen. Jason McIntyre, the big lead, reported that it happened. It didn't happen. There was no fight. You don't think the New York media would have had that on the back page for the last 3 days with Joe Judge in boxing gloves and Mark Colombo? It didn't happen. They had an argument, obviously.
I heard Joe Judge had to go get set up for a new pair of dentures.
No.
He got all his teeth knocked out.
No, that's not what happened. No. And this is the thing. I don't think it's a big deal. That's my overall thing for bringing this up. It is news. I don't think it's a big deal. But it'd be nice. It would be nice to have a bye week in which I could just relax. In which the worst thing is that Graham Gano, the Giants kicker, gets COVID. That would be a nice bye week. Not for him, but, it would be nice. It would be nice. Instead, I got to read about this offensive line that has gotten better over the last couple games because they started terribly. And Mark Colombo and Joe Judge fighting. I don't understand it. And it's thank goodness. Thank goodness. One, the NBA draft was this week, so the New York media's attention was towards what we led with Obi Toppin and the Knicks. And that the Jets don't have a win. Because this should have been back page news. I'm glad it didn't get as much media coverage as I thought was warranted. Because this is crazy. Giants don't do this. Tom Coughlin wasn't fighting people, come on. And again, I defend Judge in all this. He's the head coach, and if he doesn't think his offensive line is playing the right way, it's his job to remount the offensive line coach and have them play better. And if that offensive line coach isn't buying into the system, then you depart with him. And, if the Giants don't win games, Joe Judge will be, dealt accordingly in a couple years from now. But right now, and I know they're 3-7, they're half game out of first place. So you didn't need this distraction. I can't say I'm glad they fired Mark Colombo, but I'm glad the distraction has subsided in a way. Not because, again, I don't know anything really about Mark Colombo except for the fact he was the Giants' offensive line coach. I don't know whether Andrew Thomas will play better next Sunday because Mark Colombo's out, or he'll play worse because he needed Mark. I don't know. But, again, this distraction is gone from the Giants. And again, to finish it, no fighting. There was no fight. It didn't happen.
John, I'm going to jump in here because I do know a little bit about Mark Colombo, strictly because I wanted to see how realistic that this fight actually would be. Mark Colombo is 6'8", 315 pounds. While he was in the NFL, he played. Hold on. He played guitar in a heavy metal band.
Jesus.
He has been playing in that band since he was 22 years old. So, i.e., this man is not a man that you want to punch in the mouth. He's going to beat you if you try and fight him. He's an aggressive guy, offensive lineman, obviously. I just can't believe that that Joe Judge stepped up to the plate and knocked his teeth out right then and there. I can't believe that actually happened. That's crazy. But I think it's even better that after they punch each other that one of them gets fired, because you can't punch your boss. In any other workplace, you get fired, so I think it makes sense. See you later. Adios.
No. And all that was reported that was violent was a mean couple of words. Dan, do you want to jump in here and talk about how the Giants just can't have a peaceful bye week?
Well, as I look at Sports Illustrated has a headline that reads, Giants fire Cowboys ex-Colombo, but no coaching staff fist fight? So there's a question mark at the end of the headline.
All we need is the seed of doubt. All we need, a little seed. That's it.
Is that article by Michael Silver? Because he's the one who brought the most details on but it was a Twitter thread. I don't know if he read it, if he wrote an article. I just, collected what I needed to on Twitter, because it was a long thread where he was talking about, Joe Judge and the Patriot. I'm like, all right, we don't need to know about that. Is it by Michael Silver or is it by someone else? Huh?
No research. It was exclusively what's the most fun story and run with it.
I know. Well, and that's the worst thing too with McIntyre. I mean, not to call out Jason McIntyre or anything, but you can't he reported before all the Giants beat writers and this and that there was a fist fight, and so I knew it was
He's
untrue.
Gonna be pissed when he watches this.
Huh?
So he's gonna be pissed when he watches this.
Oh yeah, of course. Avid viewer. But yeah, Dan, who's the article by, just for full context?
It says Mike Fisher. I believe
so that's someone else. All right, but yeah, but what a week for the Giants. And again, maybe if you're an avid NFL fan, you've probably heard something along these lines, but I think it's being underreported, which is, I think, a good thing for the Giants as an organization. It's definitely been, in my opinion, underreported in the New York media landscape. All right, so now we'll shift to college football because it was a great slate once again yesterday. You had a couple of games postponed due to COVID. Clemson, Florida State, which was supposed to be at noon yesterday, did not happen because of COVID. And actually, the teams were at Florida State and Tallahassee, but the game did not commence. But there was a couple other great games in that 12 o'clock window as well. Ohio State survived Indiana. It was the top 10 matchup. Ohio State number 3, Indiana number 9. If Indiana had won, they'd be the first team in Big Ten history to beat Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and they didn't do it. Oh, and Penn State as well, and they didn't do it. They lost to Ohio State. Wisconsin versus Northwestern was another top 10 matchup. Wisconsin number 10 and Northwestern 19th ranked. And Northwestern got the win 17-7 and remain undefeated in the Big Ten. So the Big Ten championship, I think, is going to look very interesting this year. Then you go to the Big 12, Oklahoma 18th ranked against Oklahoma State 14th ranked. And Oklahoma just blew the doors off the Cowboys in the Battle of Bedlam. And on a local perspective, Rutgers, who got absolutely destroyed by Michigan last year, this year went to 3 overtimes. They did blow a lead going into overtime, so probably should have taken care of it. But in 3 overtimes, lost to Michigan. It was a 48-42 win for the Wolverines. Probably not great for Michigan, who were a 12-point favorite and almost getting upset by Rutgers, and shown how under Harbaugh, and especially this season, Michigan has definitely fallen and taken more than one step back. Locally again, Penn State lost again, 41-21 to Iowa, and not great for Penn State. I mean, when Rutgers is better than Penn State in the Big Ten, you know something's wrong. And then finally, even though it was Friday, have to get it in. Sorry, Brennan. Louisville shut out Syracuse, primetime television ACC matchup. But hey, Liberty lost, so, there you go. It might make you happy. But yeah, so Syracuse embarrasses themselves on national TV.
That was uncalled for. It's true, but it's uncalled for.
Sorry.
Let's talk some college football. Ohio State, Indiana, loved that game. I said it yesterday when we were recording the podcast before the actual game started. How about those 2 Big Ten games, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Indiana, Ohio State? And they actually ended up being very, very good games. Indiana arguably should have won this game. They forced more turnovers on Ohio State than Ohio State had in all their games combined going up to this point. Justin Fields had 2 interceptions in the first half, and Indiana wasn't able to capitalize on any of those points. At one point in the third quarter, the score was 35-7, and Indiana was able to come back. Michael Penix Jr., he's a guy that should be in the Heisman conversation. I know that he was under 50% as far as completion percentage yesterday, but he still threw for 490 yards and 5 touchdowns. A very, very good game played by Indiana. John, as you mentioned, it would have been the first year that a team has beat all those Big Ten powerhouses in the same season. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, and Indiana at this point is pretty much not going to be in the college football playoff, but they still should get a New Year's Six bowl. I mean, you look at where they were supposed to be in the Big Ten when the season started. They were at the bottom. They were down there with Rutgers, and now we're taking a look at who's down there now. It's Michigan and it's Penn State, 2 teams that started off receiving votes. Something that we expected. I still think that Indiana is a very good team. They covered. Good teams win. Great teams cover. They ended up covering this game. It was very, very close. But Indiana just couldn't get a running game established. I think they had -2 rushing yards in the entire game. And then you're not going to be able to throw the ball they threw the ball for 490 yards, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to throw the ball effectively if you have to throw the ball 50-plus times and not have any threat of being able to run the ball. And I think that's what kind of did them in, especially on that last drive when they couldn't get over the 50-yard line. Looking at the other Big Ten game, Wisconsin versus Northwestern, another ranked game. I love Northwestern. This team is very, very good. Wisconsin they looked like they were going to be a team. They actually had the fourth highest odds of making the college football playoff before this game. They dropped down. I'm not entirely sure where they're at now, but they're outside of the top 15 in the playoff predictor, I believe. They still have a little bit of a chance because they're in the Big Ten. Obviously, there's a championship game there, and the Big Ten is one of the premier divisions in college football. So there still is a chance. But at this point, it looks like the Big Ten championship is going to be Ohio State versus Northwestern, with the winner of that making the college football playoff. I think if Northwestern wins in that matchup, then both of them will make the playoffs, simply because Ohio State has proven that they're a very, very good team. They might get in the 4 with Northwestern as the 2. But I do think the Big Ten champion makes it into the playoff regardless. If Ohio State wins, I think Northwestern drops out of the playoff. I just don't think they have the track record to prove that they're one of the better teams in the Big Ten, regardless of their record. But, I was talking about how the ACC might put 2 teams in the playoff last week. I think Clemson not playing this week really hurts them just because they're not going to have the same amount of games. I know it was Florida State. I know they probably would have won by 40 points, but obviously you can't put an assumption on that. And with them not having the same amount of wins as a lot of these other teams, I think that really, really hurts their chances. The Big 12 game, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, not a lot to talk about there. Oklahoma came out and dismantled Oklahoma State, a team that at one point this season was ranked number 6 in the country. But Oklahoma State doesn't have a quarterback. You have to have a quarterback to win games. And that, as you didn't mention it, but it was in my head when you said it, that's the problem with Syracuse as well. They just don't have a quarterback. Tommy DeVito has been hurt. They were starting a true freshman for a while. He got hurt as well. They were down to their 3rd and 4th string quarterback, Syracuse was, facing Louisville. So, yeah, they embarrassed themselves on national television. But when you got a 3rd, 4th string quarterback in the game, yeah, it's going to happen. Okay, let's relax. I just want to talk about Penn State a little bit. Yeah. Man, it's so sad. It's so sad. They were a team that started off this season ranked number 7 in the country. I forget who it was. One of the TV stations, I think it was College Football on NBC, put out a poll at the beginning of the year asking who is going to be the biggest competition for Ohio State in the Big Ten. It was overwhelmingly Penn State. I think the final vote ended up being 70% Penn State, with then like 20-something% for Michigan, and then other was like 3%. Look at where those 2 teams are. Penn State has not won a game. This is their worst start in program history. They've been around for 80-plus years, and this is the worst start that they have ever had. Not only that, there's some dissension within the program as well, with some reports coming out that James Franklin told a defensive back not to report a fight that occurred outside of program program facilities that involved some assumptive top 5 overall pick linebacker Micah Parsons, strictly because he's going to be a top 10 pick. It's crazy how fast this program has started to go downhill, and I don't understand what is going on inside that Penn State program, because they were supposed to be one of the best teams in the country, and all of a sudden they have just absolutely collapsed this year in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
That's what I got for college football. I mean, there's a lot of other games we could talk about with the smaller schools, but I'll leave it out because at this point it's a race up at the top.
Yeah, no, Brian, yeah, coverage great. And just a note on Penn State, by the way, covering up something. I don't think it's out of their realm of possibility to believe that at Penn State in any fashion. So there you go for them. And not great in terms of on-the-field production as well. Again, you said it, no wins, worst. I didn't even know worst start in program history, I should say. So not great for them. Again, what I mentioned too, Rutgers, close with Michigan. I think it's a step in the right direction for that local program when they join the Big Ten, similar to, I would say, Cuse in the ACC, not to keep piling on them, but maybe where they're not, they're where the big boys play and maybe shouldn't be there and should be in a lower tier conference. Rutgers, again, they won't win the Big Ten this year, may not even make it to a bowl, but they've been competitive in mostly every single game. The one game they weren't was against Ohio State, and at least at the end, they didn't give up against Ohio State. I know it's saying like, oh, great, a team didn't give up. They lost by 23 instead of 40. But for Rutgers, who's been bad the last couple of years, it is a step in the right direction, I believe. So there you go from a local perspective and national. Now, piggybacking off this as well, college football playoff predictions, because I think this year, more than any other, it's very interesting of how this is going to unfold, because you have teams, you have your perennial powerhouses who are having great seasons, but maybe every team that makes the college football playoff may have a different amount of games played this season. You have Bama, who's couldn't play LSU last week, so they probably won't finish with, or unless they postpone it. But right now, only 7 games played. Notre Dame's played 8 games. They're undefeated, and Bama Notre Dame is 1-2. Ohio State, number 3, but they're, I believe, 4-0, 5-0. So they haven't played as many games, still undefeated, and I think proved their worth yesterday, beating Indiana. But then you go down from there. Clemson has the loss, but do you keep them in because they were without Trevor Lawrence? Texas A&M has a loss. Florida has a loss, even though they've looked good the last 2 weeks. Then you go down to where it's interesting, 8-9, and this is the AP poll, Cincinnati and BYU. Why not put them in at number 4? I mean, BYU's played 9 games this season. And maybe that's just because, scheduling is a little different and not having to be in a conference where they could easily interchange games, or more easily. But BYU's played 9 games undefeated, and we barely have them in the top 10. Cincinnati yesterday, a test with Central Florida, but they passed. So I think it's interesting. Brennan, I definitely want to go to you first for the college football playoff rankings because you gave it a couple weeks back on the show, but I think obviously now it's updated. You can give a better one, and I'll see if we have similar thinking of where we're going for our top 4.
Yeah, it's very exciting, especially with this being the first week that the actual college football playoff committee is going to release their rankings as far as who they think is going to get in. I just take a look at the All-State Playoff Predictor. ESPN has it on their website. The top 4 right now, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Cincinnati. Cincinnati's in that 4 spot. They jumped over Clemson this week with their win over UCF. So right now, it's looking like those 4 teams. Obviously, to get a group of 5 team into the college football playoff would be absolutely huge. We've never had it before. And Cincinnati beat the 2017 national champions this week. Yes. So why not include them in that as well? Other teams, I mean, you mentioned BYU. They're 9-0. They have the most wins of the football team this season, only team to have 9 wins this year. Their odds are only at 14.1%, strictly because they don't really have anybody to play. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they aren't in an area of the country where there's a lot of prestigious college football programs. They could play the Pac-12, but then we see the Pac-12 just barely trying to get into the college football, whether it be Oregon or USC. But they're probably not going to have enough games to get into the playoff either. So it's very, very difficult for BYU at this point. I would love to see them get in. I think that they are a very, very good team, a team that probably deserves to get into the playoff. And I am a very big proponent of an 8-team playoff in college football, strictly because then you get some more of these teams that don't really play that aren't that aren't Power 5 conference teams into the playoff. And I think that'd be a great idea. As far as who I think is going to make the playoff this year, Alabama, absolutely. Notre Dame, I think if they continue to win, they're going to have an opportunity to get in. But I mentioned it earlier, I think that only one team makes it out of the ACC at this point, with Clemson canceling their game this week against Florida State. I think whoever wins the ACC championship makes it in, whether it be Clemson or whether it be Notre Dame. One of those two will make it. You look at the Big Ten. Big Ten champion is going to make it. I think if regardless of who it is, if Northwestern beats Ohio State, I think they both make it, and that's your top 4.
Wow.
Alabama, winner of the ACC, and then 2 Big Ten teams. I think if Ohio State wins, I don't think Northwestern makes it. I think they take that 3rd spot, and then that 4th spot is going to be filled by either the American champion, Cincinnati. If it's Cincinnati, I don't think Tulsa makes it if they end up making the American champion. They are 25th in the country, but they do have 1 loss on their record. And then that's not going to be strong enough. A Cincinnati win late in the year. So if it's Cincinnati, I think they make it if they win the American, or the Pac-12 champion, depending on how that ends up turning out. Whether it's USC or slacking on USC in the Pac-12 championship, I think that they make it. But honestly, at this point, I'm looking at 2 Big Ten teams, because I think Northwestern has the capability to beat Ohio State, who was tested by an Indiana team who early in the year we didn't really respect as a team that had a chance at going. So I've got Alabama, winner of the Big Ten. Alabama, winner of the ACC, whether it be Clemson or Notre Dame, and then 2 Big Tens, Northwestern and Ohio State.
There you go. And my prediction may be a little different, but that's the interesting thing about this year, because if you were to look at it when it's normal times and Notre Dame's an independent, you're going Bama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson. That's just how it would be, because Clemson will win the ACC championship. You give it to them because their only other loss came versus a top 4 team. And obviously Alabama and Ohio State have to win their conference, which we assume they will. And then they're in. But this year, with Notre Dame in the ACC, it opens up either a second spot, as Brennan mentioned, for a team in the Big Ten, or the American Conference getting a playoff spot. And that's where I'm rooting for. But I would give it, again, Bama 1, Notre Dame 2, Big Ten champion, as you mentioned, Brennan, with, getting in at 3. You peg them in at 3. And then 4, again, 2 would be, as you said, Notre Dame versus Clemson, whoever wins that game, and will fall out. But I think it'll be interesting if this happens. Say Notre Dame loses to Clemson in their rematch. Do you put Notre Dame in at 4, 2 ACC schools, saying Ohio State wins the Big Ten, Bama wins the SEC, which is normal, and you put a 1-loss Notre Dame over an undefeated Cincinnati or an undefeated BYU? Because I think most people would say that should be the case. But on the contrary, Notre Dame, the last couple college football playoffs they've been in, have not played well at all. The last national championship game versus Alabama has been the one blowout championship game in the past decade. So, I think most people on paper, most college football fans, rather put a 1-loss Notre Dame in before a Cincinnati or a BYU, and in terms of a rating standpoint, absolutely as well. But does Notre Dame deserve it? Because, again, you can't go off too much of history because every year is a new year in college football. And the one loss that Notre Dame would have if they lose in the ACC would be to Clemson, who they've already beaten in the ACC. So those cancel out. I don't know. And then you bring up an argument as well. Then you have 2 one-loss ACC teams in, so you're valuing 2 one-loss ACC teams before you value another conference champion who may be undefeated. So, going to be interesting. If it was up to me, it would be Bama, ACC champion, Notre Dame or Clemson, Ohio State, and then you put in Cincy. But it's not up to me. But that would be what I hope. Prediction-wise, I think maybe if Clemson wins the ACC, they peg Notre Dame and put them in at the 4 spot, just because that loss cancels out. Dan, do you have your top 4 or any perspective before we wrap up on college football?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with what you guys have. This year is so unique. But I do think that obviously Alabama's going to get in. I think that you guys covered it with the ACC. Clemson, Notre Dame's an interesting situation, and we can expect maybe both of them to get in or one, depending on how that league comes out. Ohio State is probably another good pick. And then the last one, hey, take your pick. It'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds. But no, I agree with what you guys have said so far. I think all that could definitely happen.
I just want to throw in here, just because I was thinking about it while you guys were talking. There is a distinct possibility that we will not have anything close to an answer until we get to conference championship weekend. And if, and this is a big if, all 3 of us have Alabama slated at number 1. If Alabama loses the SEC championship, I think that they still make it. They'd have to play Florida. And at that point, because I think things could get real interesting, we might have, as a top 4, Northwestern at number 1. I think we'd have to put Florida at number 2, Ohio State at 3, and Bama at 4. We would have 2 Big Ten and 2 SEC teams in the college football playoff. And I think that's just kind of unprecedented. But there is a realistic chance of that happening if Florida is able to take down Alabama in the SEC championship.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, these conference championships won't be happening. They'd be happening pretty soon, actually, if it was a normal schedule. But it'll happen probably a week before Christmas is when they'll peg these conference championship games in. Again, all impending because of, COVID and how that happens. But yeah, so there you go. And now we'll segment into our MVP of the week. This is our favorite one. The last couple of weeks been some hilarious things, and it's pretty much what we think or what we deem is the MVP of the week. It could go from sports, entertainment, pop culture, whatever. Someone who we thought had a really good week or did something that was, we found interesting or cool or wanted to bring to the forefront, but we can't, talk about in a normal sports topic. I'll start, and it is a football one. It's a fantasy football one, actually, and that's anyone who owns Taysom Hill on their fantasy football team. That's my MVP of the week. Because if you don't know, Taysom Hill is starting for the Saints today against the Falcons, and we'll get into our NFL picks from 12:50 on and give you a pick for every game as well as our locks, upsets, and game of the week. But if you had Taysom Hill on your fantasy team, which is unlikely if you're in an 8-man or 10-man league, you could start him at tight end today and get all those quarterback numbers. He's listed as a tight end, and you could also start him traditionally as a quarterback if your team is that bad. But he's such a wild card, so if you have him on your team, good for you. Because if I understand having him maybe in a 16 or 18. Once you get into those numbers, you have people that, are uncharacteristic in terms of being on fantasy rosters, so you might just have had Taysom Hill because he was your auto pick or something along those lines. But if someone in a 10 or 12 person league, in 8, but probably not likely, had Taysom Hill on their team, good for you, because you're getting the benefit of that. Because every week Taysom Hill's again a wild card where he may line up at tight ends and have a bunch of red zone opportunities to score a touchdown, or he might be a non-factor in a game, and that's the chance you take because of the Saints' unpredictable offense. This week, still unpredictable because you don't know how Taysom Hill will fare as a traditional quarterback, and I'm interested to see at 1 o'clock how this Saints offense looks. But having Taysom Hill as a tight end as a flex move is just a great thing. And if you decided to maybe put your last pick towards Taysom Hill or picked him off waiver wires a couple weeks ago, good for you, MVP of the week. And this decision for Sean Payton between Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill has gotten some flack, but hey, go with your gut, Sean Payton. If you think that he's the better option, it's definitely alienated some of the players within the locker room who believe Winston should get the starting role, but he believes a team that's vying for the NFC South, Taysom Hill's their best option against a divisional foe in Atlanta, and that's bold as well. So that's my MVP of the week, Taysom Hill and his fantasy owners. Brennan, what is your MVP of the week?
I'm going to do an anti-MVP because I got beef this week.
Didn't even know you could do that.
So, listen, I make the rules how I want them, okay? So this week, over the last few weeks, I have been calling games for my high school, or my former high school, and my anti-MVP of the week is going to be high school sports coaches over the age of 55 because they don't know how to use technology. At one point, I was calling a game this week, and I was trying to look at stats, and this team, I knew how many games they had played. They had played 12 games. It was a soccer team. They had played 12 games. Their leading scorer, according to the stats online, had 2 goals, which isn't possible because they were 12 and 0. So my hot, it's going to be a hot seat at this point. But my anti-MVP is high school sports coaches who don't know how to upload statistics into any kind of website or give them to journalists who want to make teams more prevalent in the public eye, because not only does it hurt your team, it also hurts me personally, and it makes me sound like an idiot when I have to say the leading scorer on this 12-0 team has 2 goals and 1 assist. That's it. I can't stand it. That's my anti-MVP.
Wow. And that's what happens, for high school coaches out there. The more media coverage you give, the better your team will be covered and, exposure. That's how it works. But very hot take from Brennan, going after poor old people, but who don't know how to master technology. But that's what he decided to do for his MVP of the week. Dan, are you attacking old people as well? What
any
was
day
it?
of the week.
What?
I will attack the olds any day of the week.
Wow. Okay. Dan, are you attacking old people this week as well?
I don't think I should say yes to that.
Okay.
I think that so my coming second this week has to be Gordon Hayward's agent. I couldn't find his name, but Gordon Hayward signed a 4-year, $120 million deal with the Hornets. Keep in mind, people, Gordon Hayward broke his leg very gruesomely a few years ago. He has not been the same player, unfortunately, but he still got $120 million from the Charlotte Hornets. Whoever his agent is, very, very nice job. But I think my MVP this week comes from a topic we covered in yesterday's show. The MVP is going to be Walt Clyde Frazier because he now has Obi Toppin, which opens up a realm of possibilities of him for names and phrases that we never even thought possible before. How about the garden is poppin' and Obi is toppin'? ain't no stopping Toppin. Obi Toppin, picking and popping. Man, what's going here? You know, he's popping, cropping, stopping, mopping, topping. There's so many great things you can say. Yeah, you know, we brought up yesterday about Obi-Wan reference.
Yes.
That could become a thing. Walt Clyde Frazier has such, you know, an opportunity here to make some unbelievable rhyming phrases, and I think for that reason he has to be the MVP this week.
Yeah, my recommendation was Obi-Wan and one, which I don't think says catchy as anything with Toppin, but he's got to throw it in there. Yeah, so that was mostly the takeaway from some Knicks fans, at least for cares about announcers like me. And yeah, that's a good MVP of the week. At least instead of attacking an old person, Dan praises an old person and Will Clyde Frazier. So there you go, just the two ends of how we went with our MVP of the week. Before we get into our picks, Brennan, do you have some inactives and actives to give us for this NFL week? Because it's interesting in terms of what's going to happen in the 1 o'clock window, and we can't really give you a local perspective because the Jets play at 4 versus the Los Angeles Chargers, and again, the Giants are on the bye, so any local inactives and actives have not come to light yet. You know, Mark Colombo may be inactive. Going back to that story, he's gone, so there you go. And some news that's come across while we've been on the show, and of course NBA free agency news. Jazz signed Donovan Mitchell for 5 years, $195 million, an extension on his contract, and that was courtesy of Woj. And then the Knicks, guys, they got a guard. Theo Pinson agrees to a 2-day contract, according to Bobby Marks. Why? You know how bad that notification looks next to... Like, I got 2 notifications from ESPN since the show has started. Donovan Mitchell, an absolute stud who the Jazz drafted in the teens, getting 5 years, $195 million. And then the Knicks. Oh, yeah, we're going to sign Pinson for 2 days, and if he looks okay, we'll give him a 10-day, I guess. What? For a 2-day contract? What are they going to do? It's COVID. A 2-day contract? We'll sign you until Thanksgiving, and then we're going to... What? No. Either sign him for... And I guess they don't want to sign him for a year or commit, or maybe he'll go down to the G League. But, I mean, come on. And I believe Theo Pinson's been in the organization for a year, but, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I'm pretty sure he was already on the Knicks.
Yeah.
And I think they've just, like, re-signed him. Yeah, I just see right here, New York Knicks released Wayne Ellington and Theo Pinson. That was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
They're re-signing him. Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
So literally, it looks like the Knicks, who they had to clear cap, which we didn't touch on when we did our Knicks segment at the beginning of the show. They had to clear some cap money because, you know, there's players with expiring contracts and they can do so, maybe to target that free agent or bring in a complimentary piece, again, to hope that in the next year's free agency they can allure that big free agent. So you get rid of Theo Pinson. We don't want you. And then Theo Pinson's like, could I come back, please? And the Knicks are like, sure, 2-day contract. And why I need to know that, I don't know. But thanks, ESPN, for that notification. So there you go. Caught up in NBA news. Brennan, inactives, actives. Give it to us for NFL Week 11.
Yeah, the early ones. Inactive. Actually, I'm going to just go into an active and an inactive right off the bat because they're in the same game. Panthers versus Lions. Active is going to be Matt Stafford. He will play. He's going to be out without his number 1 running back, DeAndre Swift, but he will be active. And then inactive on the other side, Teddy Bridgewater. So they will start former AAF quarterback. I forget his name, but he's a guy that was signed from the now defunct league. So that's going to be interesting. Some more actives and actives. Active, Damian Harris, Kenny Stills, and Stephon Gilmore. And then inactive from the earlies, Sony Michel, Marshawn Lattimore, Calais Campbell, and Brandon Williams. So some big names in and out there. But, of course, when it's quarterbacks, you got to put it in a whole nother realm of importance as far as who's active and who is not. So Stafford will play, Bridgewater will not.
So there you go, inactives and actives for Week 11, some notable ones. And again, local ones, going to have to check Twitter after our show for that because not coming down the pipe until about, I would say 3:30, at least for the Jets before they play the Chargers. Don't think any news has broke on that. So now we'll go into our NFL game picks for Week 11. Our locks, upsets, and game of the week is where we'll start. But before we start, just an update on our points. Again, you get 1 point for a game that you pick right, and then 2 points if you pick a lock, upset, or game of the week. Right now, Brennan is on top. He is 105. Dan with 102. and I am the bottom of the pack with 93 points. Overall records, Brennan and Dan are both 89 and 49, and I am 79 and 59. You could chalk that up to 7 Giants losses if you want. I'd be a little closer, but it is what it is. So there you go. And again, average past couple of weeks for us in terms of separation, we pretty much had even scores. Last week we all had the same score, which was I think 8 points, but yeah, so not much separation. Maybe there'll be some separation this week. We'll start with our game of the week. We have it as Packers versus Colts. It's the 4:25 game on Fox, and we broke this down, and the spread has changed. It's Indy -2. It was Indy -1 when we last looked at this game, but I'm still going with the Green Bay Packers. I know they're on the road in Indianapolis, but in a game that may come down to the final possession or be a one-possession game, I'm picking Aaron Rodgers over Philip Rivers any day of the week. The Colts have this season not done a great job of finishing out games, and I understand it's close because the Colts are still vying for their division in the AFC South, and the Packers have looked inconsistent at times, and they are on the road, but I believe in Aaron Rodgers, again, more than Philip Rivers. It might be basic analysis picking one quarterback over the other, but time after time, it's come to that where Philip Rivers in late game situations can't win it for his team, and Aaron Rodgers does enough to do so. So that's why I have Green Bay. Brennan, I know who you probably have, but your pick for Packers versus Colts.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be pretty obvious. Yeah, the Green Bay Packers. I keep, what is this? Sunday NFL Countdown on while we're doing the show. It's just kind of off in the distance. They just did their picks for Colts Packers. 4 out of 5 pick the Colts.
Wow.
So whatever that tells you. But no, I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. Another thing they had up there was the estimated fan share. There are going to be fans in Indy today making a little bit of noise. It's looking like 51% of them are Packers fans as compared to 49% are Colts fans. The Green Bay Packers travel very, very well. Indianapolis, not too distant from Green Bay, so you know you're going to get some fans there. I think that the Packers are going to be able to win this. They're going to have the advantage, even though they're on the road, of having a much, much better quarterback. Philip Rivers is a guy that we know throws a lot of picks and can't do it when it comes down to crunch time. I think that Aaron Rodgers has been playing at MVP level. He continues that today, and I think the Packers are going to be able to win this one, even though they're the dogs.
Yeah, I got the Packers this week as well. I think that the Colts are a good team, but the Packers are trying to show that they are a better team. I think that they are a better team, and I think that if they win this week, they will prove that to everyone else. So I think this is a game that the Packers should take advantage of to show everyone how good they really are.
Packers across the board for our game of the week. Now we go to our locks. Some interesting lock picks, and mine I don't fully believe, but I had to come up with a lock. Not really have a conviction on any of these games, but this is the one I have the most conviction on. And my locks the last 2 weeks I've hit. I'm 5-5 overall. Brennan and Dan are both 7-3 in their lock picks. But I have the Cleveland Browns at home against the Eagles, 2.5. Look, I saw the Eagles firsthand last week against the Giants lose by 10. Carson Wentz is a mess. The offensive line is banged up, and even with the additions to their offense in terms of weapons, the Philly really couldn't get anything going. Cleveland is a great defensive team. Their offense may not be, off the charts in terms of Baker Mayfield hitting a bunch of receivers, Odell's hurt, but they have a consistent run game that I think the Eagles won't be able to stop. It'll probably be closer than it should be, but the Browns will win by a touchdown against the Eagles. Brennan, your lock, you're going with a game in the 4 o'clock window, and not our game of the week, though.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Vikings over the Dallas Cowboys. It was 7 when we first put it on the list yesterday, so that's when I picked it. It's moved to 7.5, so it's a little bit out of our range. But I fired in, of course. That's how I get it. That's why I get at the casino tables early, because then I only have to pay $5 a chip instead of 10.
Right.
So I'm going to go with the Vikings, but the Dallas Cowboys are very bad. They have no defense at all. Dalvin Cook has been proving why he earned that contract in the offseason, running all over every team that he's played over the last few weeks. And he might, I said it yesterday, I'll say it again, he might run realistically for close to 200 yards today against the Dallas Cowboys defense because he is very, very good. And the defense, especially the run game, is very, very bad.
I'd like to point out this week the Chiefs are 7-point favorites, and none of us took it. Normally when the Chiefs are 7-point favorites, that's a gift. But maybe we think a little closer than it will be against the Raiders this week. My lock this week is the Dolphins over the Broncos. Now, do I like taking the Dolphins as my lock? No, but I think that they're a good team. They're definitely Buffalo's biggest threat in the AFC East. They've been winning a lot of. There's a good chance they'll make the playoffs. I think if that's going to be the case, they're going to beat the Broncos today, which are just not a very good football team.
So those are our locks of the week, giving us the locks in the game of the week picks. Now our upsets. And upsets, we haven't fared too well. Brennan and I are 3-7, and Dan is 2-8. But this week, I have a feeling it is another AFC North versus NFC East matchup. Washington versus Cincinnati. I'm picking the Bengals here. I think even though they're +2 in this one against Washington on the road and Washington's at home, Joe Burrow has impressed me thus far in his rookie campaign. Washington's offense is not explosive. And they're both two teams that are at the bottom of the division. Maybe Washington feels that they could possibly win the NFC East, so they do have something to play for. But I think Cincy's just a better team. I think the spread's that close for a reason. And I think Cincy gets it done. And Brennan, you agree with me.
Yeah, same reasons as you pretty much. Joe Burrow has been very, very good. Washington pushed a team last week, almost got a win, but the team they pushed was the Detroit Lions, who we know are probably the worst team in the NFC North. I think that the Bengals are better than their record. I think that Joe Burrow is the best rookie quarterback that has played. Herbert's right behind him and catching up, but I think that with the amount of attempts that Burrow has, he's proven that he is a good quarterback and will be the franchise quarterback for the Bengals going into the future. I think even though they're 2-point dogs, Bengals probably win today against the Washington football team.
Well, both of you took the Bengals, which made me want to do something different. So I was looking at the schedule. I decided to go with the Texans over the Patriots. The Patriots are favored by 1.5 in New England. Let's face it, both of these teams are just not very good. We'll see what happens. But this is one of those games, kids, that normally I don't want to touch. But I said, no, you know what? This week I'm going to do. This week I'm going to take Houston.
So there you go. Our Game of the Week lock and upset picks completed. Now we'll run through the rest of NFL Week 11. A very good slate. And Brennan, you'll start with a game that's pretty darn good, but we didn't cover 1 o'clock window, Titans versus Ravens.
Titans versus Ravens. Baltimore are 6-point favorites in this one. Almost a touchdown. 2 out of the 3 of us taking the Ravens. That's John and Dan. I'm going to take the Titans in this one. I think that teams have figured out the Ravens offense. And while the Titans defense isn't one of the better ones in the league, they can run the ball still with Derrick Henry. So I think that the Titans are able to get this one, but I'm the only one that thinks that. Next up, Dan, you got Steelers-Jags.
Steelers, Jaguars. All 3 of us have the Steelers. Still a team that is yet to lose. Steelers favored by 10.5 on the road. That's a big number, people. I think across the board. Yeah, we do. I think Pittsburgh will win this game.
Texans versus Patriots. Dan mentioned that it is his upset pick with the Texans. Me and Brennan decided to go with New England. Look, the Texans find ways to lose games. Patriots are at home. I'll take Belichick at home. Dan, Bengals versus the Washington football team, a name you might be liking.
I know. I had Washington, then I had the Bengals. Now I have Washington. I've been going back and forth. Anyway, I have the Bengals. All 3 of us have the Bengals. You guys have it as your upset. Washington favored by 2 at home. Should be a close game, if nothing else.
I meant that you like the name now, Dan. Sorry, I just you over.
No. Gotta make that a segment at some point. It's bothering me. But anyway,
Yes.
Next. So Falcons versus Saints. Saints favored by 3.5. All 3 of us taking the Saints, even though Drew Brees isn't playing. I think that has more to do with the fact that the Falcons are not playing very well this year and are kind of a bad football team than it does the Saints are a good one.
Eagles, Browns. Browns 2.5. We have Browns across the board.